protesting or sampling what passes for the current crop of cannabis, right? They'll get together and they'll realize how silly it all is. That we've got a small group of people who, because whether they represent the criminal justice system, whether they represent private prisons, whether they represent defense attorneys, all have decided to carve out, extra legally, a very special place in hell for the rest of us.
And when it comes to cannabis, but more especially industrial hemp, and this kind of plays into hospitality too, what I'd like to talk about in a little bit. The fact that we have decided, or not we, but the government had decided that we can ignore economic realities. I mean, we're seeing it right now in Colorado. If Rhode Island was the first state in New England to legalize marijuana, legalize cannabis, the economic impact would be insane, and it's just people look the other way on it. People in power.
Well, I mean, ultimately, people start to need to start educating themselves and analyzing issues and stop relying upon what they're being spoon-fed. I mean, you know, there's
but I like my spoon.
Right. There's a host of
my
local
spoon
issues,
is comfortable and familiar.
you know, where they're so willing and eager to toe the party line that they've been fed that they seemingly intelligent people are incapable of thinking independently. I mean, you know, Dave and I worked extensively on the local, you know, the carnage, the sheer atrocities that surrounded, you know, blocking a couple of lanes of I-95 one night.
And you know, even just the kind of workaday news stories that you get out of local media, like this thing about Mattiello's campaign spending that the Providence Journal did, you know, it took me about 20 minutes of digging into Mattiello's actual campaign finance reports to say, wait a second, this story in the Providence Journal does not it doesn't tell the story that needs to be told, because they're talking about these you know, in total expenditures at places when, you know, when some of the expenditures are $30, $40, $50, like that's just buying yourself lunch. You know, that's not you know, a meeting with your representatives or committee chair people or any of those other people. $50 at the Capitol Grill is lunch for one, folks.
Well, I don't have that problem because my representatives won't return my calls, so it doesn't matter what I offer to buy them for lunch.
Hell, I get restraining orders, never mind non-return phone calls.
My reps, all they want is wieners for lunch. That's it, New York system.
Except for when they return my call to say, please don't run against me next election cycle.
What passes for political dissent, once you get out of this room, and a handful of maybe a few hundred activists in this state, is pathetic. You know, allegedly, I'm a libertarian, and I have to tell you, these days, I'm pretty ashamed of the party that I chose to affiliate with. Very ashamed. You know, the group of people that I've chosen to affiliate with, wonderful people, are so, let's just say, so absorbed with what I'll call the political equivalent of how many angels sit on the head of a pin, that they seem incapable of addressing the real-world issues that surround Rhode Island today. A perfect example. I mean, casino gambling. Sunday night we're having Liz Tabor on. I have libertarians who are unwilling to confront the notion that you've got a government-controlled monopoly effectively using the proceeds from that to compete against private business in the state by pointing out that some of them have liquor licenses and they would rather wait for a world in which there is no government interference, and they would campaign against that as opposed to actually issues that impact the lives of day-to-day Rhode Islanders.
And honestly, the Green Party is guilty of the same thing. It's guilty of the philosophical circle jerk.
Right. I mean, it's what do you call it? The greener than thou?
The greener than thou attitude, right? Which isn't bringing anybody to the table. Right. You know, when you're like, oh well, you have that, you know, you bought that purse, you know, that hemp purse for your.
Is that your Hummer in the parking lot?
Right.
I mean,
but yours is only 80% recycled materials. Mine's 100%.
Well, I mean, they're protesting Chick-fil-A's while there's outright economic repression taking place right in the state. You've got the notion of a state supporting, giving an exclusive to two privately held organizations, all right, to inflict casino gambling, to spend state money to sponsor this as a guaranteed loss and a guaranteed tax stream of income for the populace. I mean, as a libertarian, okay, if you're going to leave that open to everybody who wants to buy a license,
the
fine.
protests like Hobby Lobby and Chick-fil-A really kind of ride up my spine as a, quote, progressive. And I'm using quotes on my own progressive there. Because I really hate when people label me with that. The bottom line is, you don't like it, don't shop there, don't eat there, you're actually enabling the people who shop there by being out front passing out literature. You're enabling the people that go to basically tell you to F off.
And yet there is real issues.
They're like, I'm going into Hobby Lobby, I need some fucking macrame shit. Like, I don't... Like,
that's not a political
I don't
statement.
know what you go into Hobby Lobby for, but bedazzling equipment. I don't know.
No, isn't that bedazzling? Oh, wait. All right, that's another story.
I mean, is bedazzling a big industry? I don't know.
Well, and on another notion, imagine this. Now, Dave, you and I talked about this a little bit off air. Now, I support the Second Amendment. Dave, you? Actually,
I actually support the Second Amendment, for sure.
And what is one of the key portions of why we have a Second Amendment?
Because we're supposed to have the ability to stand up to our own tyrannical government.
Right, in the form of a well-armed militia.
Yes.
Right. So, on the other hand, I've got libertarians who would actually invoke the Patriot Act to stop people from protesting and blocking I-95. So let me see if I can get the hypocrisy of this right. If you're listening, this is your own personal hypocrisy. Look it in the eyes, embrace it, watch the hand, see the hand. Okay?
Wait, let me just set this up for a second. So the agreement that we're having is both the First and Second Amendment are valuable tools in standing up to a government that we find tyrannical.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But you also have these people who are invoking their Second Amendment rights to do that protest will be the first person to sue you as they're walking on 95 if you run their ass over.
Right. But
you shouldn't be there. Get your stupid ass out of the way.
Yeah, but
it's not an amendment right. It's
absolutely is, and I'll tell you why. Because if you're willing to invoke the Second Amendment, all right,
if you think taking up arms against your government is somehow less offensive than blocking a highway, there's something wrong with that.
All right, because ultimately what you're saying is you can take up arms and rise up against your government as long as you don't block the fucking highway while you're doing it. All right? I mean, how stupid is that? I mean, you can't say no to one act of civil disobedience when fundamental part of the Constitution involves raising a group of people to engage in outright violence against the government. Why is blocking somebody's traffic terrible when in fact you're willing to raise arms against the government? A notion that I completely support and endorse.
If you raise arms against the government, it's called treason, and they're going to throw that at you.
I don't, because ultimately the Constitution allows us.
But in today's day and age, there is speech that counts as treason as well.
If you're going to speak against the government, if you start to do actual acts against the government, certain acts are considered treason.
Not when
walking a highway
for example,
is not.
There's a president who represents a clear and present danger to the future and the safety of the United States of America. All right, and if you're willing, hear me out. If you're willing to raise it up in a militia against that, why are you not willing to allow people to block a fucking highway at the same time? You're willing to take guns up against the government, and at the same time, again, as long as they don't cross the street.
It's not the fact that they're blocking the highway. It's because they're too stupid to realize these cars will kill them.
Oh, well, that's called collateral damage.
How many people
If you're willing to accept your consequences for your actions, and if my car hits you, don't come after me because you were too stupid to realize
I don't
that
think any one of those protesters would have sued anybody that hit them.
Oh, I'll guarantee
they understood what they were doing when they walked out there. And herein lies the problem for me is, this was not about a particular incident. We're talking about the last 400 years of American history. I mean, it wasn't in the 1960s. There were black men lynched in this country. Like, this is not ancient history by any stretch of the imagination in this country. And law enforcement has always been linked to it. It's not that long ago in this country where your county sheriff would let that black guy out of a cell into the waiting arms of a lynch mob. It's not that long ago. That shit happened. We have to understand that it's not that long ago. When we look at these kind of protests, these protests were about, they were talking to me because I'm the good man who is standing by silently while evil flourishes in our society. And that's how I saw it. That was the call to me. Because I don't believe in race. I don't believe in color. I don't believe in any of that shit.
Well, they face in their lives a tyrannical
having
government.
had the living snot kicked out of me more than once by the local Department of Police.
I'm no stranger to police beatings.
Yeah, but I mean,
I quite well have learned the phone book firsthand, what a phone book can do. It's not for calling people, it's to distribute the blow so it doesn't leave bruises. I found this out from the Cranston Police Department twice. I understand. Don't get me wrong. I am not saying that I have been assaulted to the point where these people are claiming. I have never been shot at by a police officer.
Yet.
Well, who knows?
But even from your perspective, you're admitting that there are things that they do.
Oh, they do
even
a lot
to
of things.
even to suspected white perpetrators.
Oh yeah, it's
the irony of this, by the way, is the nature of stop and frisk and the type of war on drugs related police intervention that takes place in the African American community is now starting to happen in white America, because power unbridled, power unrestrained, power uncontrolled knows no boundaries. It starts as a kernel of oppression in one part of our society, and then it expands outward and takes on the rest of us. And if we don't stop it now, the people in the inner city, whether white or black, live in an environment under a tyrannical government as they see it. Their day-to-day lives are constrained and impacted by a police force that is hopelessly out of control, all in order to stop the quote-unquote war on drugs. So to them blocking the highways is at a very early stage implementation of what ultimately will be raising their own militia to take on a tyrannical government, because we have a tyrannical government now. It's already there.
Well, it's soft tyranny.
if you ever want a really good laugh,
it's soft tyranny.
It's tyranny as to, say, heavy metal, as the loft is to Sirius XM. All right? It's kind of like an easy listening coffee house kind of loft.
Tyranny light.
That is unless you're getting your ass kicked and pulled over every night because you're driving while black.
Let's just relax, everybody. I'm going to put on my NPR voice, and we're all going to just settle down about the massive violations of your civil liberties that are happening. And just remember to give to your local NPR station.
I had an interview with NPR once, P.O. I've told you the story. And they said they really liked me. They really liked what I did, but they thought I was too much of a loose cannon. Can you believe that?
Yeah. Absolutely. In fact, that may have been the first great judge of character that they've had ever. Where are you, Flo Jonic? I mean, NPR, the station that, you know, is involved in the war on women and unequal pay. By the way, do we have the phone number for Gina Raimondo's Drop a Dime line?
Somebody J-phone it. Get the J-phone.
You know, we will actually advertise on that coalition. Folks, that's why God invented Virgin Mobile. That's why God invented the burner phone. Find a business that pisses you off that's tied to a state legislature, and then I mean, for example, hypothetically, say you had a state senator who was a fascist and self-absorbed media whore, and say he owned a pizza parlor. Hypothetically, all right? He's the first person.
Let's say that pizza parlor was actually named after the Roman goddess of love.
Right. And let's just say that gentleman not only was involved in
was almost your Secretary of State.
Right. And ignored civil liberties, he also ignores the basic health code. Hypothetically, all right? He's the first person. I think somebody in the coalition radio audience, somebody in the Tony Jones world, somewhere in the Chuckles world, somewhere out there has got to actually
Chuckles
go out.
has been invoked this evening.
Where are you, Chuck? You know,
He's
somebody's
in bed.
got to drop a dime on what's the name of the pizza joint?
It's the Venus. The Venus Pizza. Good God.
Wow, for the love of God.
But there's a separate part in what you
But,
guys.
I love it. Like, Raptakis comes out this week. He's against raising the minimum wage. He's not against raising the minimum wage for any reason except the fact
That he
that
owns
he
a
owns a
business.
business that would be affected by it.